Hi everyone. So I'm going to be sharing um, my my I guess theory, my perspective on um, what in general humanity as employers, what they look at, and it is something general. I'm going to be making generalizations, though I'm taking into account all of my life experience so far. And this includes things that people have said, small moments, people who actually hire people, what they actually say, like in real honesty, and also what they say, but when I look at what they say, it's not really what they're applying, so I am looking deeper into what they're doing. So this is going to be a mixture of me seeing as deeply as I can from my own life experience, from other people, from how they act, from life situations. So this is my own thing here. I take responsibility for this, for everything I'm going to say. So yeah. So when I look at like everything with employers, with people, with work situations, work environments, I basically see 3 points that employers look for. And of course, besides looking at the very obvious common sense points like work experience, um, all that stuff, whether you're fit for the job physically, all that. What the reason why I'm focusing on this in this video is this point where a lot of people are fit for the same job. A lot of people. A lot of people have the same work experience. A lot of people, um, yeah, the market is quite saturated with people who know how to do things. At least where I am at. So there's a great saturation of a lot of people who could be good for a job. But then what's the difference? Why does one person get the job when one person doesn't? Besides like the very obvious things, what are the more subtle things? The things that aren't spoken about, aren't talked about, yet are the deciding factors. That little edge. So here I see 3 points. Hold on. Okay. So I see 3 points. The first is desperation. The second is flattery. The third point is kind of like a deepness. Now, the first point, desperation. What I'm seeing is that employers, when they see that a worker or potential employee is desperate for the job, they need the job, that is a huge positive for the employer because the employer wants to keep on holding on to the employee. They don't want to switch to a new employee because it takes so much time to train them. There's the whole hiring process, which is a pain. And so one point they look for is desperation, but they may call it other things like motivation or like whatever other positive word. But really the point is the desperation for the work, which they can be because they are a father. They have a father with a family that they take care of. So they will hire them because they know they will stick around for the job because they really need it. Or it's someone who just really needs the money, I guess, really in debt, for example. Anything that shows desperation where they really need the job and they're going to hold on to it. If you compare that to someone who is not very desperate, who's very calm, relaxed, he doesn't need the job, he's okay with that, the employer, with all else being equal, will pick the one who's more desperate because they perceive that as less risky. They have a better chance with them staying longer, supposedly. And then, of course, is all everything from what they believe and what they perceive. And this I've been gather information from people who actually do hire people who actually are running a business. They want ideally to have someone who doesn't have really great ambitions, who just want to work for the company, and that's it. So that's one dimension. I'll open this up more though, because a lot of my generation, we're calling millennial generation of people, young people, I do notice this point here where a lot of, online in general, hearing things about here and there, that employers don't like millennials because they seem really, like they don't work hard, they don't, or take things for granted too much. And so what I'm perceiving here is because this generation, their parents were quite wealthy, that they don't feel that stress or need so much, like work, perform, or this point here where desperation, where in general there's more of a calmness or laxness, and employers don't like that because they see that something bad, like they're gonna leave. So they want to see that desperation. They want to hire someone who really needs a job financially, and they can take advantage of that. Now here I'm not talking about good or bad. It's like simply talking about it like a game. You're an employer. I'm placing myself employer. Okay, you see one person who's very desperate, needs a job. Who's like, yeah, please, like, it's like the energy of desperation, like, which so people call motivation, make it sound good, really motivated. But for example, if someone who's really calm and collected with themselves, who's not desperate, tries to be motivated, it's a different tonality, it's a different flavor, it's a different taste. And you can tell it's not like that same motivation. It's not this. For example, if someone says like how much they love this job, how much they like doing this thing, they love this thing, it's not enough for an employer. And the employer wants something that they can really count on, which is desperation. At least that's their belief, that's perception. That's not necessarily true, but it's what they believe in the moment when making the decision. So I'm not talking about whether it's actually true that people who are more desperate are actually better employees. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying like what the employer believes when they look for it. This is one dimension now. The second one is flattery. Like flattery, there's the grounding word. I'm using it. The grounding word. So there's the foundational word, flattery. We can also add words like charming, nice, considerate. But notice flattery is quite the right word. When you're like having a job interview, if you're very flattering, like you say like a kiss ass, you to the employer, then that shows them that well, first of all, they feel good, which everyone who feels good, they like that, so they want to keep that person around them. Secondly, an employer who's smart knows that, okay, if this person is going to be in this working environment and they're going to be dealing with customers, then if them being very flattering to other people, something good, because then my customers will feel good and flattered. And so that means, and then that's good for business. Same thing too, if you're with coworkers, you'll see that, okay, they're going to flatter their coworkers, they're going to go well along together. That's the second reason. Third reason, of course, is that they get flattered themselves, which they like personally. And so that's why a person who may have a job interview, they might not be desperate per se, but they can be very flattering, really attractive, really seductive, really, I guess like a kiss ass. And that makes the potential employer feel good. And so they're going to hire them for that reason, which is both an economic, at least how they're thinking it, it's going to be good for business because then everyone's going to be happy, everyone's going to be flattered, everyone's going to have a good time. So it's a good person to have. I'm not saying that's true or not, I'm just saying that that's what they believe, and that's what they look for. So ideally they have someone that was both desperate, who really needs a job, and is very flattering to everyone, basically. I mean, that makes sense to me in that you can see that clearly within any job where you interact with customers, and of course when you interact with other people, your coworkers. So yeah, the human condition. Welcome to that. And of course, with the let's say in your generation, the millennial generation, with being involved with technology more and just how things were growing up more, there's that need more to be more real, more yourself, more relaxed, not always be flattering, not always kiss ass, which, is something that comes along with having to survive because, or even just for fun, I suppose. But, if you're someone who wanted something or needed to get something, and the only way was through manipulation, through doing flattery towards someone, then that's what you learned. But if you grew up in a wealthy, stable environment, family home, then there's no need to do that. So you didn't do that. You're just given the things that that you needed. So when you go to a job interview, you don't have that need or that skill to flatter because you never have done that. You never need to do it to get what you wanted, and it would just be something weird. And of course, employers want that. They want to feel like their ass is being kissed, that they're being flattered, that they see that's what they consider a people person. One is very charming, very sociable. That's what they consider social, just making other people feel good. So yeah, again, this is all my thing, my observations. Anyway, continuing. So obviously that's a challenge then for millennials who grew up in a pretty stable, wealthy situation, also who didn't need to be like that for school or survival or something like that. But of course, this is general, but there's always like a difference between past generations and this generation. So I'm making that generalization. Whether it's everyone, 30%, 40%, what percentage, I don't know. I'm not talking about that. I'm just trying to describe something I'm seeing. So the last point, which is being deep. Now, this is something that I can personally relate to, where when I would say deep things, like deep, meaningful statements about life, about things like, for example, you'll find joy through doing good work, or like something like when you drop fear and focus on who you are, life begins to flourish. Life opens up. Something like that where when I've said like deep statements to people, they'll sort of like pause for a moment and they reflect in it. For some people it works, some people doesn't. But what I notice is where that's valuable in the workplace is where an employer is looking for a leader, a manager. Now they obviously want someone who's both desperate and also is flattering, but having that extra point there of like a deepness to them that would define them as a leader, which you can look at, presidential candidates or like being people who speak very well, like orators, or people who people get behind, or very like leaderish, even like with spiritual movements, like the spiritual leaders, like how they talk, or like general leader kind of people, has a lot to do with speaking that way, where you impact people a lot, say something deep. And that sort of helps motivates people, supposedly. That's one dimension I see too. And it is something that's less common though, because employers don't need as many leaders, but sometimes they do need a leader. They do need like a manager or something like that. And so that's one point they look for. So if they were looking for a manager, leader in their company, they would look for someone who's both desperate, who's both flattering towards everyone, and also really has that point of deepness as well. So yeah, that's what I have so far. Yeah, I mean, this is all from observations of people, what they say. For example, someone said that they hired someone because they're really passionate. They love the work. That would be their ideal employee. But when I looked at what they said, that wasn't really true. What I saw really was that they were looking for someone really naive, someone who they say that they would love to do the work, and so if they love to do the work, they won't love to do it for money. So that's the naivety there, where employer wants to take advantage of people who supposedly love to take the work because that's a really naive statement to them, which it is in a way. But within playing the game, that's how it's considered naive. Of course, when being real, that's something different, but that's what an employer sees. They want to see that point where they get the advantage, where they get benefited. They want that. They don't care about anything else, really. At least, I'm saying generally, if you're an employer who does care about other things, then you'd be considered, let's say, a bad player. You'd be bad at the game. That you'd be considering all these different things, and there's too many things, and you practically wouldn't be making money. Now, whether this is actually the best business way or not, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying like how people perceive situation moments, because right now people are limited to their nature, to their design, to who they are. So all this is part of the design of them, the mind, how they work, how they perceive things. All these different aspects. So being charming, being kiss ass, being flattering, being desperate, really needing a job, working for the money, showing that. That's just seen as something positive in the system. That means you have accepted the system, you are part of it, working with it, at least that's what they believe, what they believe to be the case. And of course, I see things much differently. I see it like who you are would be the best employee would be someone really stable and really calm, who's not within desperation, who's within clarity, who's able to make decisions clearly, who's really know who they are and sure of who they are, and able to expand themselves at will. But when they perceive that, a person being that way, just sitting there calmly, what they perceive is a stereotype already from the millennials, where it's really, like a young person, you're really like calm, doesn't care about the work, just lazy, just slow. So, I mean, that's unfortunate for them. If they give that guy a chance or girl a chance, they go to see. But, that's the reality as well. And there are people who are like that, of course. There are, of course, people like that in the world. But it's kind of like that stereotype then where it spoils it for everyone. But, yeah. So, my advice is to pretend to be desperate, pretend to be flattering, pretend to do all these things, or even a way to make it real, because I don't know. If that's what they're looking for, just give them what they want, and then once you get the job, just show them what's real. Really. Show them what would be real to be best, to be at the top of your game, to really work for real. Because right now people are limited in what they perceive, what they know. They only act with what they know. So, yeah. Besides that, I'm just going off topic now, I guess. I'm already finished with my video. I just want to say other things like there is that potential there within aligning with someone who, who's like you, who gets it, who is understanding, the process about who you are in situations. I mean, there are valid points within considering, within running a business, within having that, let's say, desperation. But the question is it emotional? Is it really helping you, really? And it works for a while, but then you burn out, right? And that's what always happens. People burn out. Because that's not really a real stability. That's just something that can really be relied on. And of course, they look for the next person who does it. The next person who has the desperation, has, I suppose, the energy that feeds the system, like the business. Almost like my conscious system that feeds off of energy. It needs emotions, it needs feelings, it needs the flattery, it needs the emotion of desperation to activate it. And I mean, there is that potential there of that deepness of just being real, and that is something that reaches into a person's being, who they are. But of course, that depends on the person. They have to be open to that. But there are people who are more aware than other people. There are people who have a more deeper connection with their bodies, with who they are, their beings. So yeah, it's possible to find such people, to work with them. Maybe they're looking for people who are more deeper, more real, because in the long run, that's what works. That's how an employee actually stays for long term. It's when they are deep and real, not just superficial, because in reality, the truth is, many people are playing this game already. Many people are already playing the act of desperation. They're acting desperate, or they're acting flattery. They're all acting it, manipulating it. I mean, some people are just for real, like they're actually, that's who they are, and that's their situation. But for other people, they've learned to just act. And maybe they were in a situation before, but then they continue being in the situation because that works. And it's just a point of survival. You're just trying to get whatever works for you, trying to get advantage. It's just like a game where everyone is a competition with each other. That's what I'm perceiving now. In the starting point of seeing competition and seeing people at odds with each other. People trying to find the slightest, subtlest indication of who a person is and what would be the best for a business. And it's manifest in different ways, in different words. But at the core and heart of it, this is what I'm seeing. What's really going on with the people. And yeah, I'll leave it there because you can fill it up with your own life stories and life experience. Add to it, take it away, do with what you will. This is me sharing for anyone that likes to take this and use it in their life. I'm just figuring stuff out. I am someone who's young, who's only been in a workplace kind of situation for a few years, so understanding how people work, their minds, why do some people get hired, other people don't. So yeah, I'm figuring that out. What I notice is what I'm talking about. At the very least, it does exist to an extent. You know, but how come no one ever talks about it? How come I'm the only one who's actually observing this and talking about this? Out of all the millions and billions of people in the world who work in places and apply for jobs, good job interviews, how come this dimension isn't talked about? It's like a secret in a way because we're all in competition with each other. We don't want the other ones to take an advantage. But with exposing it, I don't think employers are going to change because what else can they do? I mean, it's like the starting point of already believing everyone is a liar, everyone's already deceptive, everyone's already a competition, everyone's trying to take advantage because that's the starting point of business, that's the starting point of money. So what else can they do besides looking for those key points of flattery and desperation, or maybe deepness? What else can they do but look for those superficial points? Were they going to go up to someone and ask them, okay, are you going to stay with me for this many years, or something like that, or are you going to commit? I don't know. It's like that's not how they see things as possible, to take someone's word like that. And so what they believe more is someone's emotion, how a person acts, I guess, with their flattery, their behavior, more than what they say. Because human word is not trustworthy. The word as something that you stand by, your word, is not trustworthy in the system. At least in my system. At least in my world here in a first world country. Which I'm sure applies to many places in the world. But yeah. So thank you for listening, joining in this moment. I hope this is supportive. I do consider talking about things which no one ever talks about as something really valuable. But yeah, so share your own videos. Talk about things which are never talked about. The taboo topics. Talk about things that aren't said publicly. You may be able to change how things work through doing that. Thank you very much. Bye.